Well, good evening, everyone. If you're watching live from Australia, my name's Jason, and I have my good friend Duncan Banks with me from London, England, or from the UK anyway. And then all the way from Atlanta, Georgia, my good friend Dave Adamson is with us. Guys, thank you so much for being with us, at least for the evening in Australia, but other parts of the day where you guys are from. Dave, how's things in the morning in Atlanta right now?
Man, it is it is early. It is 5 a.m. here. And so, it's a cold morning, but I've got a cup of coffee with me. I'm surrounded by good friends. Doesn't get better than that, right?
Perko, this is quite civilized for me. I've had my morning cup of tea, and yeah, it's 10 o'clock in the morning, so it's all looking hunky dory for us over here in the UK. But you said we're your three good friends. I heard that we're just your three only friends. Is that
That's
true?
That's that's actually a true statement, mate. And anybody that knows me really well would say absolutely certain that is a true statement. So, hey, it looks like we've got some friends though that are joining us for this webinar, which we've entitled "Your Service is Online. Now What?" And I'd love to find out where people are tuning in from, because I know we've had people from a network of churches in the UK, Dave Duncan, that you are a part of. And then, Dave, I know that you've been promoting it not just here in Australia, but over in the States as well. So perhaps people could jump into the chat section and just put in where you're tuning in from. We'd love to know where you're tuning in from. And then I also just want to mention that Duncan is going to be monitoring our Q&A section throughout the entire webinar tonight. And if you have a question at any point in time, we really want you in real time to ask your questions. So don't write it down. Please don't write it down on a sticky note or a notepad at your place. If you could write it down in the Q&A section of the webinar, that would help us out, because Duncan's going to grab those questions in real time as we're going and help to get answers to those questions that you may have. So got some people coming in. It looks like a guy named Aaron coming in from the UK, and somebody coming from Western Australia, where I think it's actually only 5 o'clock in the evening over there. So great to have you with us tonight. Thanks so much for joining us for this webinar. I want to introduce you really quickly to the two guys on the call, not just by name, but give you a little bit of information about them. Dave Adamson, for those of you that don't know, is an Australian that's living in Atlanta now and serves as the social media and online pastor at North Point Community Church, where you may be familiar with a guy named Andy Stanley, is the senior pastor there. And you actually helped Dave to serve all of the 6+ campuses around the Atlanta area, and a very much a growing network of churches across the US, UK, Canada, and Australia. Maybe tell us, Dave, as we get started here, how long you've been doing ministry in this digital online space. Because for many people
Yeah.
maybe on the webinar tonight, including myself, this is somewhat new for us, and some of us were forced into it, but you've been doing it quite a while. Give us a bit of background on that.
Yeah, so I only got into full-time ministry in 2008. And before that, I lived in Australia, and I was a TV sports reporter for Channel 10 in Australia. I see there's a couple of people from St Albans and Mildura, Australia, who probably remember, A, know Channel 10, but B, probably remember a show called Sports Tonight, which I tell my US friends it's basically our version of ESPN Sports Center. And so I was doing that and had no plans to get into full-time ministry at all. But in 2008, a church in New Jersey contacted me and said, hey, would you be interested in coming over and being a pastor and starting a church online campus for us? So, back in 2008, there were literally me and 7 other online pastors in the US. That was it. And so I've been doing online ministry since then. It's obviously transformed a lot especially into the social media space. But I just love leveraging technology to connect people with each other, connect people to God, and to help people grow their faith.
Yeah, it's fantastic, Dave. And I'm so grateful that you've been able to help not just churches here in Australia and the US, but also over in the UK, where Duncan leads a network of churches called the Further Faster Network, which is a network that's partnered with North Point Community Church and North Point Partner Ministries in Atlanta. Duncan, give us a little bit of background. You were in the pastorate for a number of years before you began leading a network of churches and resourcing pastors. Give us a little background on what your ministry experience has been.
See, I know I don't look old enough, Jason, but I have actually been pastoring churches for 25 years.
Unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. I have a secret. It's oil of Ulay, they call it. It's wonderful. It takes years off you. So yeah, 25 years I've been in. I've started a church from scratch. There were 6 of us in somebody's kitchen, and we grew that. And then right now I'm in the east of England, about an hour north of London. And I've been involved in that church for the past 15 years. And I came off staff about a year ago to lead this network, the Further Faster network of churches in the UK. And our whole mission, our whole aim is to help churches grow by reaching unchurched people. Churches sometimes grow because the Baptists down the road have an argument with each other about the color of the back toilets. And they split, and half of them come to us. And we think, oh, our church is growing. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with that.
That's never happened, Duncan, in the history of church, I don't think.
But we want to see churches grow because people who are far from God start coming close. And so our passion is to help leaders and help churches go further, faster by offering them great content, connection like this, and an opportunity to see growing churches in context, and to coach them all along the way so that they can see their church grow, not because the Baptists have had an argument or the Church of England have had an argument or the Pentecostals have had an argument, but because unchurched people are starting to come to their church. So that's our passion in the UK. And I'm just having a blast leading a group of churches trying to do that.
That's probably my favorite thing about both of these guys, is that they are incredibly passionate about seeing people that are far from God come into a relationship with their Heavenly Father through meeting Jesus. And we so badly want to make it just super easy for people to discover who Jesus is. We want to try and remove every hurdle possible for those that are trying to discover who Jesus is and what a relationship with him looks like. And I feel like in this time, in this season that we're in right now, we actually have an opportunity that's unprecedented, where we've got churches that have been forced into putting all of their content, their church services, things like that online because we can't meet physically in buildings. And this isn't just a challenge for churches in the UK or in the US or Australia. This is a worldwide situation that we find ourselves in. And it was one I've found as I've talked with a lot of church leaders, as I helped to lead a network of churches here in Australia called the Irresistible Churches Network, very similar to what Duncan's doing in the UK and what Dave and the team are doing in the States. What I've found is that many church leaders were kind of rushed into this. So some churches were already doing services online, but many churches, I would say the vast majority, a large percentage of churches, perhaps weren't already doing this, or maybe they were dabbling in it. But we've all now been forced very quickly on a very short time frame to do what I would consider the most extensive shift in methodology, ministry methodology, that the church has ever seen in all of church history in such a short period of time. And now we're all asking the question, or at least the pastors and the leaders I'm talking to are saying, hey, I've got my service online. We figured out how to have a stable live stream every Sunday. We're pre-recording it, or we're showing it live on Sunday, or a simulcast of it being live. But now what do we do now that we've accomplished that task? And I'd love to kick it over to you, Dave, because you haven't been doing this just for the last month. You've been doing this for the last decade or more. And there is something beyond just getting your service online. So we're in this situation where we've got our service online and we're asking the question, now what do we do? What have you experienced in doing it now for a decade that is the next step beyond just showing your service online?
Yeah, such a great question, and it's one that I'm getting asked a lot as well, because we've moved out of that initial flare-up phase where, we've all scrambled, we've all gotten to that point where we know what Zoom can and can't do when it comes to leading a small group. We know, how to pre-record, and a lot of us even know how to do a simulated live on YouTube or a simulated live on Facebook, and that's a real testament. I want to encourage everybody who's listening or watching that's a huge thing, and you should you should pat yourself on the back for that. That is a huge thing. But we're all ministers. We all got into ministry for a reason. That's to help serve other people. So now the question needs to shift from, now that we've got Sunday figured out, how do we do this whole ministry thing? How do we serve people's needs? And I would argue that there's a lot of different tools that we have available to us that can help us make that connection. Obviously Zoom is one of them. I mean, you're talking to me from Australia. Duncan's listening in from the UK. I'm in Atlanta. Well, we've got a bunch of people writing questions down in the chat. I mean, this is the great use of technology. But it has to go further than that. It has to be something that I think from a church leader's perspective, we have to make some fundamental shifts in our philosophy, in our approach to online streaming, to actually turn it into a ministry. Social media has to make a shift in the capital C church, because it's not the sort of thing that we leverage to promote anymore. We have to leverage this to pastor now. So we're seeing this fundamental shift happen. And I think it starts, though, on a philosophical and a strategic level of what those next steps would be.
I was just thinking to myself, can you imagine if this pandemic had happened sort of 12, 15 years ago, before we had an iPhone and before we had this kind of technology? Imagine they closed the doors of our churches, forced us onto trying to do something to connect people before we had all the, I mean, you imagine trying to do ministry on a Nokia 3310. I mean, it would have been virtually impossible, wouldn't it? So that I think we are beginning to leverage all these various technologies, and I am so proud of the church. I really am, because so many pastors who love hanging out with people are now having to learn how to premiere on YouTube and chat on Facebook and do Instagram stories. And so I want to high five all of you guys, because I think you're doing an amazing job. And the other thing that I love is that the mark of a great leader is a leader who's humble and teachable and curious. And every single one of you that's on this call right now, there's a humility and a teachability and a curiosity about you that says, okay, I'm doing this, but I want to get better. I'm hungry. Teach me to do more. So I just applaud you guys for being here, and I applaud you for what you're doing in a tough situation. And hopefully some of the things that Dave says in particular will be of help to you as you try and plot your next stop.
Yeah, and we obviously want this to be practical as well. So this is why we're pushing, keep asking questions. There's a Q&A panel. Make sure you ask, because we want to talk philosophically and strategically, which I know is where you're going to go with this next question, Perko. But I also want it to be practical about the things that, we're going to talk about what we're going to measure, what we need to be measuring, and what we need to be looking at in order to measure success and put a line in the sand from that point of view.
One of the things I think, Dave, and it's really a question, is it possible that the speed at which we were forced into pushing our services online, is it possible it didn't give us a chance to really articulate and define what is exactly the vision and maybe the win or the goal of our online service? And so perhaps we just took what we were doing in the physical space and applied it to the digital space, but perhaps those two different spaces don't have the same win. Is that possible? Or maybe we didn't have enough time. What have you seen as far as churches trying to figure out how to filter whether or not they're winning or hitting the goal when they're putting their services online these days?
Yeah, such a good question. I think obviously you're so right. We were so caught off guard that our the first cab off the rank for every church had to be tactical. How do we actually make this thing happen? And so now we're backfilling with the strategy behind it. And every strategy starts with a vision. We have to have a vision for what we're trying to achieve, because what you learn, pretty quickly, I would say 3 to 4 weeks, maybe 5 weeks at the most into online streaming, what you start to realize is that the stuff that you're doing offline doesn't translate apples for apples into the online space. There's so much that we can do, and that's super helpful, but we have to have different strategies around what a win looks like when it comes to the online space And that all starts with a vision. So, it's about casting a compelling vision to the staff and leaders in your church, as well as casting a compelling vision to the people who are watching, the people who are normally attending and showing up to your Sunday services. This is where having some sort of vision, creating some sort of vision for the future for what this might look like for people is really important, not just during this season when all we have is the online, but once this whole situation is over and in a couple of months from now, and maybe things start going back to some sort of semblance of normality when we can actually open the doors of our church again, how are we going to take the lessons that we've learned during this space and apply them to offline as well? But it starts with us creating some sort of compelling vision now around what it means to be an online church, what it means to serve people's needs and share the gospel and minister to people in an online space. So I would argue that it all rises and falls on that vision.
So the vision for your online service is really going to be step one. That's the starting point, You're saying, Dave, that will help you define exactly the strategy you're going to go after and the filters by which you understand, are we actually hitting the goal or not? I think that's the critical first step. Duncan, prior to this webinar, you made the comment that if the leader doesn't articulate and communicate what the vision is, that gap is going to be filled in by whoever's watching online, whether it's a guest that just came across your site somehow because a friend shared it with them on social media, or a regular attendee who's now watching the service online. They're going to fill the gap. And you talked briefly, Duncan, about a great example of somebody that cast a compelling vision. Tell us a little bit about what you've seen.
You see, Perko, we're all selfish individuals, really, don't we? And if no one makes it clear what the aim or the win is for the service, we presume it's about us. We presume it's about me and my family. And so I sit there not clear about what the win and the aim is. And I'm thinking, why aren't they doing more worship? Because I like worship. Why is the preacher doing a 5-minute talk and I want a 25-minute in-depth Bible study? And why is there nothing for my kids? Because my kids need to be looked after and pressed on in the faith. That's the job of the church. Because no one's made it clear that the win on YouTube on a Sunday morning for our church is that we want to be a front door to people who don't normally come. So we're creating something that your lost friends will come to, will stick around for the entirety of the service and actually want to come back and experience more. And so I saw, the online service, your Sunday online service, is critical to the success of any church because it's the shop window. In marketing terms, it's the hero product. But you have to cast a compelling vision to your people about what it's primarily designed to do. And so just as this kind of coronavirus thing kicked off, I was following Pastor Craig Groeschel from Life Church, and he posted this 40-second clip on his YouTube account. I'll put the link into the chat so people can see it. And the clip was amazing. They tarted the clip up a little bit with some cheering and some little graphics and videos and things, just 40 seconds. But I'm sitting on my sofa in England, and he was talking about, we'll preach the gospel, we'll take it online, we'll do anything short of sin to reach people who don't know Jesus. But we're not going to stop preaching the gospel or making the name of Jesus known. And I'm sitting on my couch in London, millions of miles away, and I'm going, how do I sign up for that? How do I give to that? How do I become a part of that? I want to be part of that kind of a church. And there was a clarity about what the win was. But I don't think our people sitting on the sofa know exactly what the win is. And that's probably because we as leaders don't know ourselves and haven't articulated it clearly either.
Yeah. Hey,
that's so well said.
Just to explain to our audience, one of the things that you mentioned, Duncan, I found it somewhat humorous. I think Dave did as well. You said that the video from Life Church, they tarted it up a little bit. I think you mean that they embellished it. Maybe they put added a bit of flair. They enhanced it. They added a bit of flair is what you're talking about. I appreciate the fact that you used that phrase that I'm not sure I've ever heard used before about a video, but that's fantastic.
Listen, who invented this language called English?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's a great question. Hey, Dave, there's a question that's come up about this idea of articulating and communicating a compelling vision about your online service being the most important thing out of the gate as you start this type of ministry. What's the current win for North Point Community Church's online service. Can you articulate for everybody watching what that looks like?
Yeah, there's two parts to this answer, I think, because there's the current answer of what a win would be, and that's specifically is to help keep people connected to our church, people who have been part of our church for a long period of time and are feeling somewhat disconnected at the moment. We want to keep them connected. We want to invite new people in, as as Duncan spoke about a little bit earlier. We want to invite those unchurched people into our services as well. So we want to create an experience that is compelling enough for people to share and invite their unchurched friends to come. But we also want to create environment. We also want to create an experience for our students and our kids so that they're pressing on in their faith as well. They're taking the next step in their faith journey too. So all of those things in this current season have become a lot more important and a lot more significant. They were part of our pre-coronavirus, that's the PC period, the pre-coronavirus period. They were an important part, but back then it was more what our online presence. And when I say our online presence, I don't just mean our services, I also mean our social media. It was a way for us to connect with people who, for whatever reason, couldn't get to a physical church. Maybe that was, they travel for work. Maybe it was an illness in the family or something along those lines. But also, according to a research study done in Australia and in the Australian church, the average person we know attends church once every 4 to 5 weeks. They actually walk into the building. So, we were starting to take this omni-channel, what we call an omni-channel approach to online church, which is providing a seamless experience, whether somebody walks into the building one Sunday, listens to a podcast the next Sunday, watches online the third Sunday, and then watches on demand on our website or our app or on YouTube the fifth Sunday after that. So we're trying to create this online presence that allows people to stay connected even back then. But pre-coronavirus, our social media had a completely different feel. We were leveraging it to promote events, and we were inviting people to events. Now on social media, we're inviting people to conversations. That's a huge shift in how we leverage this tool that we have. And so we're starting to see things shift and change just a little bit. So primarily right now during this season, we are trying to help people take the next steps in their spiritual journey and keep them connected to each other and to our church as we move forward. But I'd like to think that as things start to go back to some sort of normality, that omni-channel approach will continue to move forward and help people stay connected even when they can't get to a physical church. Now, I just want to explain that idea of omni-channel. Omni-channel is way different to multi-channel. Multi-channel is, we have an online stream that has its own separate strategy and system, and we have an offline one, physical service that has its separate units for measurement and strategy. Omni-channel is when it goes across the board. We see this in the world all the time, right? Here in the States, if the three of us were at my house and we decided we were going to go to Starbucks and get coffee, there's a couple of different ways we could do it. We could all drive to Starbucks together, get out of the car, go into the store like a bunch of Neanderthals, and actually physically ask somebody to prepare our coffee for us and pay them with cash, right? That's the old school way. Or we could, on the way there, Duncan, because he's pretty tech savvy, could get on his Starbucks app, order and pay for the coffee so that we just have to go through a drive-through and pick it up. That's omni-channel. That's online and offline working seamlessly together. I always like to think of it this way. If you've got a swimming pool and you've got those lane markers in the swimming pool that says that you have to swim, this way, this is the fast lane, this is the slow lane, et cetera, and you have to follow those rules. That's multi-channel approach to online ministry. Offline, doing one thing, online doing another. In an omni-channel approach, you take all the lane markers out, and people can access and swim anywhere that they want in any style that they want, and they can just have this free space. That's what I think online church will become and what it should become.
Yeah.
So Dave, can I ask you a question into that?
Yes.
You're famous now the world over for being the social media online guy. Are you saying, so this omni-channel approach thing, are you saying that physical church is a part of the digital experience as well? Or are you saying as time goes on, the church is going to be less interested with gathering people in a building and more interested in doing things online? I'm just thinking about it yesterday. I can't remember. I used to go to the bank a lot because I'd have to pay a check-in. I'd have to get money out. I'd have to talk to the bank manager about overdrafts. I never go to a bank now. I can't remember the last time I walked into a bank. Everything you do is on an app on your phone. So I don't need the physical location anymore. And that's why banks in the UK in particular are closing left, right, and center. I don't need the physical. Because I can do everything I need to do online. Are you saying the church doesn't need that particular channel of physical? There's lots of omni-channel, various channels we can do digital stuff on. Are you purporting that?
Yeah, look, I think that is a great question because it allows me to clarify. No, I am not saying that online is going to, take over the offline, that people are going to have a digital experience, so therefore we don't have to have a physical experience. Every time I talk about this, people typically bring up Hebrews 10:25 and not let them neglect giving, meeting together as some people do. They always bring up Hebrews 10:25, but for me, this is not a Hebrews 10 issue. This is a Mark 16 issue, which says, go into all the world and preach the good news. Online space is all of the world. There are people who can't get, for whatever reason, to a physical church. And so, no, I'm not saying that we should. I don't think we should ever give up meeting physically together. That is so important. The online experience just gives us the ability to enhance what's happening offline. We get to connect with people for 1 hour every Sunday, pre-coronavirus. Well, all I'm saying is we can use social media to stay connected with people for the other 167 hours of the week. And that, for me, is more of a biblical model. When you look at the way that Jesus discipled his disciples, he spent all day, every day with them for 3 full years, 24/7. We've got the technology that allows us to do that today. But before this whole season kicked in, we weren't really leveraging it for those sort of things. We would have that 1 hour connection with people, but then we would move to social media only to promote things. Now we need to move to social media to pass to people.
So really, Dave, what you're describing is a transition pre-coronavirus where social media, online presence, those types of things on digital platforms were primarily promotional tools. And in the post-COVID-19 environment and during, they need to become pastoral tools, not just promotional, but pastoral. Okay.
Yeah, so that's it exactly.
So not every church is going to agree with the win of their online church service being the front door or the shop window, whatever you want to describe it as, Duncan. But we're still saying that no matter what your win is, define it, articulate it, and communicate it to the congregation and to the audience so that people know what the goal is of that online experience. That's the first step. In our strategy of model of ministry and the networks of churches that we're a part of, we want to move people through different environments. Ultimately, our goal is that they would find their spiritual growth through community. We think that people grow spiritually best when they're connected relationally. And so talk to us a little bit about, Dave, the strategies of moving people through these environments now that we don't have physical locations to gather people in and help them take a next step. What do those digital strategies look like, and what platforms are best used to move people from, say, an online experience of just watching on a Sunday morning and now actually getting connected into community in, say, a Zoom call during the week sometime? Because what I'm noticing, Dave, is I'm noticing churches, I'm calling it the wild, wild west of digital ministry. It's like we've got all of these platforms, from TikTok to House Party to Instagram and Facebook and Zoom call. I mean, there's just a plethora of platforms to choose from. And I feel like leaders are just throwing everything at the digital wall and trying to see what sticks. And then they're going to hang their ministry on those things that stuck. But is there a more strategic way to leverage different digital platforms for specific environments or steps for people to take? Is there a better way?
Yeah, you're 100% right. We're throwing everything at every platform that we can possibly think of. And so, the number of people who are now leveraging TikTok, for example, 6 months ago, they were saying that we should never use TikTok in the church because of what the content is that's on there. Yet now these are the same people who are holding prayer sessions on TikTok, who are doing church on TikTok. We're just throwing everything. And unless we have a streamlined strategy, we're not going to know what to measure, and we're not going to know what that win is. And so, in our network of churches, we've always talked about the front door, the living room, and the kitchen, right? That the front door is where people start to come in and access your house. Think about it from a house point of view. The front door is where you greet people and where you invite them in. The living room is where they start to get settled. But really, and this is true certainly in our house, the kitchen is where real life is done. It's around the kitchen island that we have deep conversations where relationships get built. So we've always talked about these separate environments of the front door, the living room or the lounge room, and the kitchen. Now, back in, the early 2000s, the front door of our church was the website. The living room was, the parking lot, the front door greeting area of the church where people were welcomed in. And then the kitchen was kind of the auditorium. Then in around 2010, social media became the front door to our church. The living room became almost like the website or the auditorium, and the kitchen became small groups because that's where real life was done. But in an all online coronavirus season, that has to shift completely. And so, I've been tossing around this, and I know Jason and Duncan, we've talked about this before, and I had a certain layout of how I thought it would be, that YouTube is the front door of the church, and if we leverage that to encourage people to come in, then we can move them to a Facebook page or a Facebook group, and then ultimately they would maybe follow us on Instagram, and we can pray for them during an Instagram live event. But I think I've started to shift that, even just in the past couple of days, to where I think Instagram is now the front door to the church. That's where we put stuff that makes our church look inviting, right? That's where we put all of those images where we can make our services look really inviting. We can take a small snippet of what happened on Sunday and we can push that out onto Instagram TV. And because Instagram is the biggest social media platform in the world at the moment, it's a great place for us to connect with new people. Then I think YouTube becomes that place where people can take a little step deeper, because they can watch longer services at that point. If we're repurposing what we're doing on Sunday, if we're repurposing those services on purpose, then what we're doing is we're creating 2-3 minute snippets that we're putting out on Instagram to entice people to come in a little bit further and watch the full message, 35-40 minute message with us on YouTube. And then Facebook becomes the new kitchen. Facebook is where people have the opportunity to leave longer comments, where we spend a lot of time responding to people, and where we can get them into Facebook groups. So I think if we started thinking through it in that terms, that might streamline a lot of what people are doing online from a church leadership perspective. So think of your church Instagram account as being the place where you're putting content that entices people to come in. Then you're leading them to the living room, the lounge room, which is YouTube, where they're watching longer experiences. They can have some comments, but it's not as in-depth. But then they move to Facebook ultimately, where they choose to follow your church page and maybe even jump into a Facebook group where you can have really deep, meaningful conversations with people in an environment that they're super aware of, because Facebook has been around for such a long time.
Yeah.
Dave, can I ask a question to that again? Because if we need, every church needs some kind of a strategy, because at the moment, like you say, I think it's hit and miss. We're just bunging everything on every channel, and so we're not quite sure who should be reading what. Is this for our church family? Is this for people who don't currently connect with us? But what you're saying changes everything. So if we're saying Instagram is primarily for guests, if you were coming to my house and you came to my front door, I want you to feel so welcome, because you've never been to my house before. I wouldn't want the front door to be cluttered with a load of family rubbish. I'd want it to be clear and easy for you to access. So if that's true, if Instagram, if everything, every photo, every comment, every picture, every Instagram video, if that's all about enticing guests and making guests feel welcome, that changes everything about what we as pastors and what we as churches put on our Instagram account. And likewise, Facebook, and likewise, YouTube. And I wonder where Zoom fits in with that. I wonder whether Zoom, it kind of fits in with Facebook as well as being the kitchen table, because you can have just your friends around. With Facebook, I guess anybody can kind of nose in, but with Zoom, you can just invite your friends around the kitchen table, can't you?
Yeah, totally. And obviously it doesn't line up perfectly. But I like that approach, to your point, that if every church, if every pastor was taking this assumption that Instagram is the place where we're going to invite people in to take a step further into our church community, even if that's just online, then what we post there becomes a lot more strategic. The images that we post, the graphics that we post, the videos especially, that we post should be done in such a way that an unchurched person would be able to not only understand them, but want to lean in a little bit and go one step further. And so those Instagram posts also need to drive people somewhere else so that they can, if you're going to invite somebody into your house, Duncan, you're going to stand there and talk to them, and you're going to make that environment perfect, but ultimately you're going to say, hey, come on in and let's walk down the hallway together to the lounge room, right? So leveraging Instagram in a way makes it strategic, whether we're using a link tree type format in the bio to drive people to our website or drive people to our YouTube channel. We have to have a next step for them in every Instagram post. And if that next step leads people to watch a 35 or 40-minute video on YouTube, then our YouTube needs to have a next step call to action to it as well. That has to be strategic. That has to be a channel that is clear and easy to navigate and provides people with a next step to, hey, connect with us on our Facebook page or connect to our website or something along those lines, always pushing people to the next environment. And if they land, the only reason why I think I've landed on Facebook being that kitchen table is I think that people are so familiar with the Facebook environment that, and it's so clear when somebody leaves you a comment and you comment back, we're in such a routine of that, I think that that's where that can be built. That's not to say it's not Zoom. Perhaps when people feel comfortable around that Facebook space, you can lead them not just into Facebook groups, but into Zoom small groups as well. And from that point of view, that's where I would be leveraging for churches who are just new to the whole social media online space. Leverage Zoom for what I would call short-term small groups. Typically in a church, you join a small group, you're in it for a couple of years, if not life. In fact, some churches call them life groups, right? But the thought of doing years and years and years of small group like this, I don't think is very compelling for people. So if you're going to leverage a platform like Zoom to do small groups, I would label them as short-term small groups, and I would also give them a topic, make them topical short-term small groups. It might be how to parent in a coronavirus environment. This is a 6-week group that we're going to have on Zoom. Well, that's topical and it's short-term. I'm going to get into that because I'm like, oh, it's only 6 weeks. I can handle 6 weeks of doing this. And then maybe once all of this is back to normal again, we can continue that group in the offline space and we can start meeting physically together. So I would be leveraging Zoom in that way. So again, it doesn't always line up perfectly, but this is my best guess at it right now. This is where I'm landing on it right now, that Instagram is the front door, YouTube is the living room, and Facebook groups is the kitchen.
Yeah, Duncan, you've got a question, and I want to jump straight to that and then maybe even take some more questions from those that are listening online.
Yeah, let me do that because there's quite a few people asking questions of you, Perko, and Dave as well. So Levain has, I hope I've pronounced her name right, but they've asked, what do you recommend is the most effective online Sunday presence for services to reach people? Is it Facebook? Is it YouTube Premiere, YouTube Live? Facebook Live, Facebook Premiere, is it the church website? Because I was watching the North Point service on the church website this Sunday and it crashed, just disappeared on me halfway through. So what is the best, what's the best platform to stream services, would you say, online?
Dave, you take that one.
Yeah, so just to back up one bit and just to comment on what Duncan had said, your website is always a great place, but a lot of churches didn't build a website with streaming services in mind. At North Point, we have totally built all of our services around the idea that we're going to be streaming them online specifically. And still, even though we did that, for 2 minutes on Sunday, Easter Sunday, it's our Super Bowl, and the whole thing crashed. And it crashed because it got overloaded. There were more people on it than we thought would ever be on there, and so it didn't really handle it as well as it could. So yes, you're right. There are things that can go wrong on a website. Whereas at the same time, as soon as that went down on our website, I jumped across to one of our church's YouTube channels. They were streaming the service live on YouTube, and they did not have an issue at all. Why? Because YouTube is primarily a video platform. This is where a whole generation of people go to find answers for everything, from fixing their car to fixing their marriage. And so because of that, and because it's so robust in the video world, the stream that crashed on our website didn't crash on our YouTube channel. So for me, I'm always going to be a huge advocate of pushing YouTube for streaming services, for a bunch of different reasons, not just because what I said about it being the place people go to find for answers. It's also the second biggest search engine in the world. And as such, when you post your message content to YouTube, it is infinitely searchable, especially if you are keyword optimizing your message titles. So instead of calling it, Easter 2020, which nobody's ever going to type into a search engine 2 years from now, because nobody wants to know what happened at Easter 2020. But if you title that message something like, is the resurrection still relevant? People are always asking that question. In fact, for our services on this past Sunday, that's what we called our service. That's what we called our Easter message. Not not during the live stream, but when we posted it to YouTube, we called it, is the resurrection still relevant? And that came after doing a keyword optimization search to find out what people are asking around the Easter story and linking that with what our pastor spoke about on Easter, and that's how we're able to do that. So that video will live on now and be an answer for people 5, 10, who knows, 20 years from now, because of the way that YouTube is set up. So I always encourage people, if you're able to do it, stream your services on YouTube. The other piece to that, and I know we're going to get into this in just a minute, but if you're streaming it to Facebook, that's awesome. Facebook is a great tool to use. But what Facebook does is, because it auto rolls as soon as somebody scrolls past a video on their phone, as soon as they get to a video, that starts playing. And even if they scroll past it within 3 seconds, Facebook counts that as a view. So you get these stats that are a little bit skewed, and you have to dig a lot deeper to figure out what exactly was going on. So while it's a great platform, you have to be aware of the shortcomings of it as well.
I think the other point you make there, Dave, what I noticed about the North Point service was you called it, is the resurrection still relevant? But I didn't have to wait an hour to find the answer to that. If my washing machine's broken down, I don't want to go on YouTube and find how to fix your washing machine video that's an hour long, that includes songs and interviews and everything else. I want someone to get to the point. And Andy, right at the top, yes, he went on to do a longer message. Yes, we had some beautiful music as well. But right at the top, there was a little intro which talked about this so you were enticed into finding out more of the answer. So I think sometimes we can title our messages, this is how you find the answer to fix your broken life. But it's 45 minutes before we even talk about that again, because we have to have a whole bunch of other stuff. So people will duck out. So a question for you, Perko, a great question here. It's about life after lockdown, really. Has this become the new normal, someone said? So what do you think the new normal will look like for churches once the sanctions are lifted and we're all allowed to go and hug each other and greet one another with a holy kiss?
So my gut feeling on this, Duncan, is not necessarily what my hope is, but my gut feeling is a large percentage of churches are going to go back to what they were just doing before. That's my concern. My hope is that people would actually move into more of what Dave has already described, where it's this omni-channel approach, where it's a blend of both the brick and the click, as the retail space would talk about it. So it's the brick and mortar building, but it's also the digital experience that I have with my church, and the two are seamless. So if I am a traveling salesman and I can only get to church, say 2 Sundays a month, it doesn't mean that my experience is limited to those 2 Sundays, but rather I'm going to leverage the digital platforms my church provides me along with the physical platforms that they provide me to have one seamless brick and click experience, like many retailers have already learned how to do. I think of hardware stores in Australia, hardware stores, I'm sure in the UK and overseas in the States, they figured out how to do the brick and click thing. So if I'm looking for a lawnmower, I'm probably going to research it online, but I may end up going and purchasing it at the physical store. But see how the experience was seamless from brick to click. That's what my hope is will be the new normal in life after lockdown.
That's great. That's a great answer. Dave, one question from my good friend, Carlos, who's listening in all the way from Latin America, which is very exciting. He asks a brilliant question. He said, we used to stand out as a church, but now when you're in the online world, you don't stand out anymore because there are fantastic churches, world-class speakers that you can log into anywhere. So what makes you stand out? What makes a church sticky for an audience when you don't have the Disney budget that churches like North Point and Life Church and others have?
Yeah, look, I think it comes down to what your definition of relevance is. We can, yes, we can, and this is not new just for coronavirus. Even before the coronavirus hit, we could still have access to great speakers. And in fact, that's a lot of what I would do. I would go and listen to my pastor Andy Stanley preach on a Sunday. But then on Monday, I was catching up on Craig Rochelle's message, or I was listening to, another world-class speaker from somewhere in the world. Maybe it was a Hillsong message, maybe it was a Saddleback message or something like that. So I would still always do that. But when it comes to this sort of thing, how you stand out to your community is how relevant you are to them. And by the word relevant, I don't mean, whether or not you have, pretty moving lights and if your worship leader wears a deep, V-neck shirt and has really tight skinny jeans, that's not relevant.
Please don't wear the deep V.
Yeah. I think in church world, we've decided that relevance is the way something looks. But here's the reality. If I've been stuck in the desert for 2 weeks and I've not eaten or had any water, the person who is most relevant to me is the person who gives me a glass of water and something to eat. It doesn't matter what they look like. They are the most relevant person to me in that moment because they have met my physical need. So how do you stand out in your church? I would be saying don't fall into the trap of comparing yourself to what other churches are doing. Just focus on doing something in your community. Do something to serve your local community. And there's so many different things that we can be doing in that space, and we can be leveraging social media and technology to do that. People don't know that, for example, you can do a Twitter search, a search on Twitter from within a 10-mile radius or even just a 5-mile radius of your church building, looking for certain hashtags or certain keywords. So, for example, if you did a search right now from Twitter within a 10-mile radius of your church and the hashtag was no toilet paper, you have the opportunity in that moment, if you've got toilet paper stored up in your church because nobody's going there anymore, to go and grab a couple of rolls, reach out to that person on Twitter and say, hey, we've got a couple of rolls, DM me your address, I'll drop a packet off. You are the most relevant person in the world to that person right there and then. And you've leveraged technology to do it. Now, to avoid the social distancing issue, you drive it to the house, leave it on the driveway, and then take off. Like, you've served them and you've done it in such a relevant way. That's what I think the key is to standing out. You're not going to stand out in the worldwide church online environments, but you can stand out to the people who are more likely than not to come to your church once this whole thing's over. If they've seen that, wow, that church down the street served me during this time, and they leveraged online technology to do it, whether it was what I just said on Twitter, whether it's, hey, I'm going to take prayers on my Instagram live event. I'm just going to pray for anybody who's in our community right now. And you praying for them is exactly the same thing. You become relevant to them when this whole thing is over.
Yeah, great answer. Can I ask you 4 real quick fire questions that sure. Perko and Dave, you can answer? One for you, Perko, real quick fire one. How do we utilize volunteers Because we used to have a team at the front door, a team on the car park, loads of volunteers. But how do you utilize volunteers now we're in a digital space?
Yeah, so I think you just have to be a little bit innovative and ask the question, what were they doing before and how could they do that same type of thing but in a digital platform? So guest services or welcome team, host team, whatever your church calls it, I think it's an ideal time for them to be welcoming people in a chat section of your YouTube live, of your online service. So just like they would rock up to church maybe 30 minutes or 45 minutes before the service started in the physical location, have them rock up to your YouTube online service 30 or 40 minutes ahead of time, jump into the chat section and welcome people as they're coming and start engaging with people just like they would if they were out in the parking lot shaking hands and welcoming people into the service. A lot of your team that are involved in helping to create small group environments or community groups or connect groups, life groups, whatever you call them, during the week are ideal candidates to serve on a Sunday right after the service for anyone that's interested in taking a next step. And as Dave mentioned before, you're leading people to a next step, whether that's asking them to go over to a Facebook group or to go to your website to find out more information or check out this Zoom conversation we're having right after our online service. All of those people that love to help connect people and create community are ideal candidates to serve and volunteer in those areas. I think of people that have been serving in family ministry areas like children's ministry, middle school, high school ministry, whatever age groups. Those are people that are still ideally, they're positioned to be able to connect with students during the week. And my kids are online on Zoom calls all the time. Why not be a small group leader that hosts a high school Zoom call? And you can still be volunteering in that area that you're most passionate about, but just leveraging a digital platform to do it.
Yeah, great. Dave, question for you. Talking to the camera is very different than standing on a stage in front of people. Claire's asked this question. How do you relax and talk to the camera? Because most of us are used to a room full of people, whether it's 25, 250 or 2,500. We're used to a crowd, but it's different, isn't it, when you're broadcasting down the lens of an iPhone? Any tips and tricks on that?
Yeah, I've got tons of tips from that point of view. My first tip is probably the most significant and important, though. I think I think, and this is my personal opinion here, I think we need to shorten our messages. I think we need to not focus necessarily on doing a 35-minute message because it's hard to maintain eye contact with a camera for 35 minutes. But it's a lot easier for us to do that if it's like a 15-minute message. What if we shifted our services? What if we shifted our messages so that they were shorter? Maybe take that 3-point sermon that you've got prepared that's 40 minutes and turn it into 3 10-minute messages and post one on Sunday, post another one on Wednesday, post another one on Friday. Like split it up and do it that way. So that way you're not putting as much pressure on yourself to maintain that eye contact for as long as possible with the camera. The other thing that I would suggest is, and this is actually something that is going to be live for me tomorrow. I'm actually preparing a message right now, while I will be once the sun comes up here in Atlanta, that's going to be shown at a church in Australia this Sunday, and I'm going to be recording it today. And so what I've done in the preparation of that is I've taken some tips from what I'm seeing on YouTube and what I've seen on YouTube for the past couple of years that I've been, sniffing around the whole YouTube channel area. And so what I'm doing is I'm going to do a little piece to camera and I'm going to introduce myself and everything, but then I'm going to have some B-roll over the top of what I'm talking about to help show it and explain it a little bit better, but to also break up the monotony. If you watch any YouTube video, there's a couple of things you notice. First of all, Duncan, to your point you made earlier, what they do is they start off by telling you what the benefit of you watching this video is going to be. Hey, my name's Dave Adamson, and by the end of this video, I'm going to tell you what Hebrews 10 actually means. Well, that's the enticing piece, right? Well, hang on, I want to stick around for this, and I've looked at the time frame, and it's only 12 minutes. I've got 12 minutes. I want to figure out what that verse or what that chapter is talking about. So do that, and then if you can break it up visually with some B-roll, some shots. Like that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be pushing to some video that I've got just in my computer about some stuff that is relevant to what I'm talking about. So that's the breaking it up visually. But then also I would suggest, and you see this a lot on YouTube videos, and I've not really seen a church do this yet. Maybe this Sunday will be the first time some people experience it. But what happens on YouTube a lot is they do what's called jump cuts. So they talk about a small paragraph, and rather than trying to gather themselves and preach like they would normally preach in a physical space, they do it. If you can do it a little bit differently, it creates visual awareness. A jump cut is when I might say one paragraph, one section or one bullet point, and then I will stop and say the next bullet point. And when I'm editing that together, I jump cut in. So it might start from sort of here up, but then when I make the next point, the camera might be more like that. And then as I say, the next point after that, it goes back to this. They're called jump cuts, creating that visual trigger that allows people to stay connected a little bit longer. I think that's super, super helpful. And then the last practical thing when it comes to looking at cameras, what I've noticed a lot of people do during my time as a journalist, a TV sports reporter, and also as a producer, is as soon as somebody's finished saying something, a prayer or something like that, they typically look off camera really quick. And as soon as you do that, you've broken that connection that you've got. So I would say hold your gaze, fix your gaze on the camera for as long as possible to allow your editor to fade out, to do a fade to black or something along those lines while you maintain that eye contact.
And one of the things I've found a lot is with a lot of church videos is we don't put enough emphasis on the sound. I think people can forgive a bad picture and a shaky camera, but sometimes if the sound's poor, we'll just go away. But so work hard on making decent sound.
Yeah. If you've got a small church with a small budget, you don't have a lot to buy equipment, and you're wondering how you can improve. If you're just using an iPhone, but if you plug a $50 microphone into the lightning port of your iPhone, that improves the sound quality, that makes a huge difference. That's in fact why, even with this video now, we're recording this so that we can put it out as a resource, but all three of us are recording the audio at home so that we've got good audio when we put this whole thing together. So try to improve the audio at all costs.
Okay, real quickly, there's loads of questions we could spend as long as we like. I'll ask one more question, because I know people can connect with you beyond this, Dave, and ask you questions. Some churches are just the team are turning up in an empty building and doing a service, a bit like North Point. They're doing a service from the empty building with a couple of musicians and a preach. And it looks the same as you would on a Sunday, just without a crowd of people. Is that the way to do it? Or should we be, my friend Richard's asked this, should we be at home and do the kind of normal components, but do it from various rooms, the kitchen and the garden, and make it more feel like it's at home?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of churches do a lot of different things over the past couple of weeks, and I've enjoyed all of them. I've enjoyed the people who have, been in their auditorium on the stage, because clearly they've got the capacity to do that. But equally, I've enjoyed watching videos that were clearly shot with somebody in their front yard with just a hedge behind them. And then I saw one church do it where they had a green screen behind the person, and so they projected some images behind them as well. Like, I've seen all of those varieties, and I think all of them are valid, and all of them are good, and all of them have the capacity to make a huge difference. What I would say is, don't worry so much about where you're recording, but worry more about what you're recording. One model that I would love for churches to play with is, rather than doing a 65-minute service that includes 3 songs up front and then notices done by somebody in their living room and then a 40-minute message from the pastor who's shot in their kitchen. Like, people aren't used to watching videos that are that long. The average length of a video on YouTube is 4 minutes and 20 seconds. The average view time on a video on Facebook is 17 seconds. That's the average across that whole platform. So people aren't used to sitting in on their computer for a 60-minute single message. Now, people will spend hours watching multiple YouTube videos for sure, but they're watching multiple YouTube videos shot in a YouTube format. It's rare that people will watch a 60-minute full-length thing on YouTube or online. So I would be encouraging you to rethink what your church service might look like. Maybe it should start with the message up front that has that hook that we talked about, right? Hey, this is what we're going to be by the end of this video, this is what you're going to know. Then do a 15-minute message, and then have 1 or 2 songs that are recorded at the end of worship. Like, what if we changed it up and did church a little bit like that? What if that was a model, not the model, but a model that churches could do? That would take a whole lot of pressure off the production guys. It would take a whole lot of pressure off a whole lot of things, and you might actually get more views on your YouTube service or your Facebook service.
Hey, Dave, there's a lot of questions that I see coming up that are kind of in this category of effectiveness. So one question that's popped up is I've seen a lot of churches that are pre-recording their services and then they're showing them at 10 a.m., 12 p.m., 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. You know, they're just showing them all day, every 2 hours. And then there's another question that came up, and the question was around how are we asking, are there questions that churches are not asking currently that we should be asking? And one of the things that we've talked about regularly, the three of us that are hosting this, we've talked about the fact that we're not convinced that churches are necessarily measuring their online services effectiveness in the right way. So perhaps churches aren't asking the right question as far as how do we measure whether our church service is successful. And then they're maybe not even looking at the times that they're showing it and their effectiveness. So would you mind just spending a little bit of time and briefly describe for us what you feel like is the most effective things to be measuring in your online church services effectiveness, besides just how many people viewed the service?
Yeah, that is such an important and significant question in this environment, especially if we're establishing a vision for what we're going to be doing. We're changing our model a little bit, the way we're actually presenting. Then the next thing is the importance of measuring the right things. What I've been seeing, and I've been getting asked this question a lot lately. In fact, it's not just smaller churches who are asking this question, or churches who are new to the online streaming environment that are asking this questions. I was literally in a chat just yesterday with some of the biggest churches in the world. In fact, I know my friend Rob was on the call earlier in the chat, and I hope he's still there. So Rob, this is the conversation that you're talking about. He was asking some of the biggest churches, like Transformation Church here in the U.S., Church of the Highlands, Gateway, North Point, Life Church, asking the same questions around what is the right thing for us to measure. And so while I don't have a definitive answer, I do have a lot of suggestions and opinions around it. The one thing that I know for sure is that vanity metric of how many people viewed your service is not the right thing to be measuring. And here's why. Like I said earlier, on Facebook, for example, if you're streaming your services live to Facebook, Facebook counts anybody who has watched your video for 3 seconds. That's a count. That's considered a view. Now, that person may have just been scrolling through and it auto-played, because that's what Facebook does. It auto-plays videos. That person gets counted. That's like having 10,000 people show up into the parking lot of your church, but not actually ever coming in, and you count them as attending. We would never do that in the offline space. So why are we doing it in the online space? So the more important metric, in my opinion, is the view time. How long people actually watched your service for. And in my personal opinion, I think the best way to quantify that is through the percentages. What percentage of your video service was viewed? Was it 2%, which is actually predominantly what happens on Facebook? The most metric that Facebook says is the most viewed of a video is 1 to 2%. That's 1 to 2% of an entire service. That's not even the chorus of one song in the big scheme of things physically, but digitally we still count that. So I would say, no, let's start counting what's the percentage, and make for your church, decide on what that metric will be. At North Point, one of the things we do is we don't count anybody who watches for less than 2 minutes. That's the cutoff mark that we have, because what we've learned through, a decade of doing online ministry is if people watch for 2 minutes, they usually stick around for a lot longer than that. So we have a cutoff mark. If you watch for 1 minute and 50 seconds, we don't count you at all. And it's not that we don't care about you. It's just that we realize there's probably other factors that came in that led you away. Maybe you were you clicked on a link by accident and that got you there. So I always lean heavily into the percentage watched. The next thing after that for me is engagement. How many people liked the video on YouTube, commented on the video in Facebook? How many people shared an IGTV message or video on Instagram to their Instagram account? They're the things that I measure, the engagement component. And so the way I like to look at it is from, if you think of like baseball or kickball or something along those lines, if somebody watches a video and they like it, that's like getting to first base, right? You've kicked the ball, you've hit the ball, and you've got to first base. If they like it and they comment on it, then that's getting to second or third base. Like you're getting progress there. But if you want to count a video view as a home run, that's somebody who has liked it, commented on it, and shared it to their own social media platforms. That's where they've actually said, this content is so good that I am going to put my name behind it. I'm going to put it on my social media platform. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So Dave, you're saying that the new way of measuring shouldn't be views, but should really fall into three categories: view time, not just views, but the actual time or percentage of time that people stayed online and viewed your service. Number two is engagement, which would be likes and comments. And then number three is endorsements, which is people sharing it to their own personal social media platform, which is basically them endorsing it and signing their name to it to say, I validate this content and I found it helpful. So those three big areas are the things that people should really be measuring: time viewed, shares and likes, comments and likes and shares to their own area.
Is this not? I was just thinking about this, Dave. No, I was just thinking about. I'm trying to put myself in the heart of a pastor right now, who's used to doing church and preaching from behind a pulpit and all the rest of it, and they know what the win is for a Sunday. They know if they're successful or not successful. Now you're saying that the way we present a service online, the way we present a service on YouTube, we're having to judge it by different measures. We're having to judge it by how long people stay with us, because no one gets up and walks out of church. You kind of just don't. Very few people do that. But we click away very easily from something we're bored, or we scroll through something that we're bored on. So you're changing the parameter completely, and you're saying it's about watch time and it's about shareability and commentability and all that kind of stuff. What if a pastor's sitting there thinking, hang on. You're telling me now, if that's my judge of success, I've got to make my service much more like a YouTube video. So I'm going to have to program my service totally different to a regular Sunday. I'm not sure I can do a 5-minute welcome and then 25-minute worship set with people speaking in tongues and all the rest of it, and then a 35-minute sermon, and then some response time at the end. Oh, and we've got to put the prayer and the notices in. I'm not sure I can, because that's not going to increase my watch time on YouTube. So I think what you're saying is it's kind of hard for pastors to digest, because you're saying we're going to have to completely and utterly rethink how we program what we do on YouTube or Facebook.
Yeah, and I know that that's hard. But I think the reality is when we move to a fully online, and remember, this is not just we're doing Sunday service for a couple of hundred people, and we're just streaming that to the online to those people who can't get there for that Sunday. We are completely online now. And so that shift, that shift has to force us to shift the way that we do church as well. It naturally has to do that. Now, I get it. Some churches have liturgies in place that don't necessarily allow them the opportunity to shorten their service as much as what I'm saying. But one of the great things that my pastor Andy Stanley says, he says that you should marry the mission, date the model. Marry the mission of your church. That shouldn't change. Whatever the mission of your church is, don't change that. But you date the model. The model is the way that you do that, the way that you live out that mission. And that can change based on circumstances, based on seasons, based on people, or based on technology. And so now's the time for us to start to rethink some things. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to go out there and be the next Casey Neistat or the next YouTube sensation. That's not what I'm saying. You have to find a way to connect with the community that you're part of. Now, how that looks is going to look different for everybody. I'm just saying that a model One way of potentially doing that is to shift it into a shorter style of service. But that's something for the church leaders to wrestle with, figure out the vision about what they're doing, figure out the metrics that are important to them that they're going to measure, and then make everything fit according to those things. But yes, this is a season where we have to be asking ourselves really hard questions, because the reality is when people are watching only online, there's so much distraction. It's whether it's your kids, whether it's what's happening in your house, or whether it's what else is happening on another tab on your computer, or what notifications are coming in on your phone. We are so distracted when we're at church. I think we have this when we're at church online. I think we have this picture that during the worship session, everybody is standing up in their house and they've got their hands raised and they're all singing along. I can tell you honestly, that's not what happens in my house. People are making toast. People are on their phones because we can. There's people running around and nobody's showered or they're in bed. I think the picture is different in reality to what we have in our head. And so I think we just need to adjust our expectations a little bit and adjust our model.
Hey, there's a number of questions that have been coming through both the chat and the Q&A piece around family ministry, specifically children's ministry online and youth ministry or student ministry online. And I just want to, speaking of endorsements, I just want to endorse an organization that we all love and an organization that has been incredibly generous during this season. And it's the Orange or the Rethink Orange group. If you haven't looked at Orange curriculum, you've got to go out and rethinkorange.com or just Google Rethink or Orange. You'll find the curriculum for family ministries and churches. But they are providing just incredible online resources so that you can provide an engaging service, an engaging family ministry environment for your families online right now. And so I want to highly recommend them to go and check them out. But one of the questions that came up is, how can we apply the things that we're talking about to children's ministry, since a lot of them aren't even online? And I want to talk really briefly, and Dave, you jump in on this, or Duncan, anytime. One of the foundational principles of the Orange curriculum is this idea of partnering with parents. In fact, that's where the name comes from. Reggie Joyner, founder of Orange, and prior to that, founding staff member of North Point Community Church and the Family Ministries director there at the very beginning, sees the church as being yellow, representing the light of the truth, and sees the home being red, representing the heart and kind of the warmth of a nurturing environment where a child is raised. And when you partner with parents as a church, you mix those two colors together, you get orange. And that's kind of the foundational principle of the Orange curriculum. So specifically to answer your question though, how do we engage with children's ministry since a lot of them are not online? The answer to that question is simply this: they may not be online, but their parents are online. So if we partner strategically with their parents, we're going to have the opportunity, the invitation into the living room, bedroom, wherever, through the iPad, television screen, whatever it is, to do ministry with that child, even though they're not typically online. So I actually think that these digital platforms are an ideal time, an ideal opportunity to partner with parents who, by the way, are desperate for things of quality, and they are desperate for things of value to get in front of their children on a screen, not just some game or something else that they've been on for hours on end, but they're desperate for really good quality curriculum and content for their children to learn from. So highly recommend Orange curriculum, and really want to recommend that you, even if you don't use Orange, partner with parents and provide them with a tool or an environment for their children to engage with. Dave, any thoughts on specifically the foyer living room kitchen strategy, or the front room lounge room kitchen strategy for that demographic, not adults, but for say teenagers or students or children? What are the types of platforms you would maybe match up with those categories or environments for that younger family ministry demographic?
Yeah, so this is so important. And as somebody with kids, like, I understand the importance of it. And I also understand how, we have to kind of wrestle our girls to make sure that they're staying connected with their church during this whole season. So any churches that are attempting to make it easier for students to connect, I think is fantastic. For any students who are over the age of 12, I would be suggesting leveraging, first of all, to present your messages, leveraging YouTube, because there's that generation has grown up on YouTube. They're used to YouTube. And if you can put your services, messages, worship, whatever in that environment, I think that that's going to be a real big win there. And then when it comes to small groups for that older, 12 and up sort of age group, what our church has been doing is leveraging Zoom. They get on a Zoom chat, and that's how they have their small groups. They see everybody. They get to experience exactly the same thing, just in a small group that's online. So I would leverage those two platforms for that age group. For younger, I think for the 12 plus also, I would be suggesting either TikTok. If you're able to say stuff within it, it's just a good way to stay connected with people. It's a minute long, so there's enough time for you to either have an inspirational quote or to read a Bible verse to those students as well. So I would leverage TikTok and leverage your Instagram as well to connect with that age group, because that's where they are. For younger than 12, and the cutoff for me is 12, 13, because most social media platforms have a cutoff at 12 or 13. You can't join if you're younger. That's why I'm specifically saying that age group. For younger than that, then I think we need to start, as to your point, Perko, is start talking to the parents and letting the parents direct the student or the child to what the content is. And there's a whole bunch of different ways you can do that. Facebook is a great way to connect with parents, because that's where most parents are. So you could be posting your content into if your church is the First Baptist Church of London, you could say at the First Baptist Church of London page, you're going to have a group for parents of the First Baptist Church of London off that page, and you could post your content there that allows parents to present it to their kids in an on-demand fashion. They can watch it whenever they want on an iPad or something along those lines, and they can stay connected. Or the other way to do it is to continue to leverage YouTube, but just target it towards the parents. This is a lot of what we're doing at North Point. Is our student and kids ministry leaders have created content that they're pushing out onto YouTube and asking parents to share it with their kids so that they can do it, they can watch it together, or they can just direct the kid to go and watch it from an iPad or something along those lines on YouTube. So pushing them out to those platforms is the best way to go. And I would also just love to say this. North Point is creating a whole bunch of student and kids curriculum as well, which you can find on our YouTube channel. Just search North Point Community Church or Buckhead Church or one of our churches on YouTube. And to your point, Perko, Orange is creating fantastic content across the board, across all age levels. And you can find all of their stuff on YouTube if you search for Parent Q. That's CUE, Parent Q. Now, the reason for that is they know that it's the parents who are going to connect with the kids and present the content to the kids, and they're trying to create that partnership. So if you're looking for that content that Perko is talking about, it's all up there for free. They do it, there's songs, there's worship that you can watch on demand, there's songs that have dance moves, but they've also got this Sunday specific content that you would watch with your children on Sunday, and they have questions associated with it. So you can literally be pastorally caring for your kid and helping them take the next step in their faith journey simply by watching one of these videos. And another one that I would throw out there is the Bible Project. The Bible Project create fantastic animated content that I think is accessible to, primary, elementary, and high school students as well. So just searching through Bible Project, search on YouTube for Bible Project, you'll find some great content there that can really help kids connect with their faith and take that next step in their faith journey.
Hey, Dave and Duncan, we've got time for a few more questions. So for those that are watching, I'd love it if you jump into the Q&A or the chat. If you've got any final questions for any of us, we'd love to be able to make sure we tackle those questions before we go. I do want to, though, while we're giving you some time to ask those questions, if you have any. Duncan, were there any other questions in the chat or in the Q&A that we didn't get to that we need to address before we give people the next steps and where they can get this content after the call?
Yeah, there was a good question from my friend Sam, who comes from Dublin in Ireland. And he asked the question, what questions are churches not asking right now that they should be asking? which is a fantastic question. And I think right now the church needs more than ever before passion and beauty and fresh imagination. And church leaders need to be able to say to themselves, where does that kind of stuff come from? And it comes from the creatives that you have around you, the innovators, the entrepreneurs. It comes from dreamers, who are going to honor the past, but not be bound by it. It's going to come from artists, and you've got them in your church who know how to stop the scroll on Instagram. It's going to come from visionaries who will take all of us beyond business as usual. It's going to come from risk takers who won't give us what we want, but will give us something that we didn't even know we needed. I think the church needs fewer leaders who are going to appease and keep people happy, and more leaders who dare to go beyond the usual. If we can lean into those kind of people and they're in our church, then I think we can thrive in this online environment, and we can find a launch pad for what life will look like after lockdown. So I think churches need to be saying, who are the creatives? Who are the innovators? Who are the entrepreneurs that I can pull around me and help me in this phase of ministry?
Yeah, I would add to that. Another question we need to be asking, church leaders need to be asking that we're not asking, is what I talked about earlier. How long are people watching your services for? It's great that we have more people. The metrics tell us more people watched our online stream than actually attend in person, and we celebrate that, and we rant about that. But ask the hard question of how long were they watching for, and dig a little bit deeper into that. And the next thing I would say that I would love churches to constantly be asking, did last week work? Did it connect the way that we wanted it to connect? And if it didn't, how can we shift? How can we change our model in order to connect better with people in the online environment? Because what works offline doesn't necessarily work online. I read this great quote the other day, which says this: we presume that and this is by Richard Rohr, we presume that if you criticize something, you don't love it. But it's just the opposite. There is a major difference between negative criticism and positive critique. The first stems from the need for power. The second flows from love. What a great, this is what we need to be. We need to be critiquing what we've done positively because we love connecting with people. We love our church. And it's not about being negative. That's a positive take on it. So ask those hard questions about how long were people watching for? Are we connecting with people in the online space? And how can we do things better, even if we have to shift and change our model?
Yeah, one of the things that comes to my mind with this question of what are the questions that maybe churches aren't asking that they should be asking. I recently just have been reviewing a report that's been done here in Australia from a massive research project from the McCrindle Group. And they have identified the top 5 emotions that Australians are feeling right now during the COVID-19 crisis. And the number one emotion for Gen Z or Gen Z, however you want to say that, Gen Z, Y, and X, the number one emotion is anxiety or anxiousness. For those that are baby boomers and builders, anxiousness was actually, or anxiety was much lower on the list. They were feeling more vulnerable because they're more susceptible to the virus and that type of thing. It was interesting that Gen Z, Y, and X, their number 2 emotion that they were feeling was frustration. So number 1 is anxiousness or anxiety. Number 2 is frustration. But the boomers and the builders weren't feeling frustrated until much lower on the list. And so one of the questions that came to my mind is this: the older generation aren't feeling as anxious and they're not feeling as frustrated. What if a church leader decided, how do I interview a builder or a boomer to give us insight for those of Gen X's like me, Y, or Z, however old you are, to help us with our anxiety and help us with our frustration? They've obviously lived through some things that have built up resilience and grit in their lives so that they're not as anxious and they're not as frustrated. And what could we learn from that generation? But how could we capture it in a way that is compelling for the younger generations to want to watch it and learn from it to help us through this season? So just a random thing that I came across that I thought, man, what a powerful thing that would be if you leveraged one of the 65 plus year olds in your church, put them on Instagram, and all the 20-somethings are saying, that's how I overcome my anxiety. That's how I overcome my frustration. I think that's maybe one way that a church leader could be handling it right now. Hey, we've got some, no worries. Duncan, Dave, we've got some resources that we've developed, and much of the content that we've talked about tonight or this morning, depending on where you're watching from, is going to be available. You've put it in a format, Dave, that makes it accessible, easy to understand. I'm sure lots of people were taking notes and now they're super discouraged. Why did I waste time taking notes? He's going to give us these notes for free. Dave and Duncan, tell us how these people can find these notes, these resources, and get access to them after the webinar. And we'll start, Duncan, with you with Further Faster Network.
So for us, everybody that's on the webinar has been invited by me via email. So in the next couple of days, I will email that resource out to everybody so they've got it there. But they can always lean into me, and I know they can lean into you boys as well, and keep the conversation going. Perko, just before Dave talks about how you can access these things in Australia, can I just make one final little plea as we come to the end of this? I would love to have pastors stop saying something, whether they're physically in a building with a congregation or whether they're online on YouTube. And it happens all the time. The biggest pastors and the biggest churches to ordinary local on the corner churches. And it's this: you get to the end of the service and every pastor says, so glad that you've been with us. Can't wait to see you back here next Sunday. In fact, I hope he doesn't listen to this, but Andy Stanley said it on Sunday. See you right back here next Sunday. And I know what he's saying. I understand what he's saying. I was talking to Perko about this the other day. We have a TV show, a technology TV show in the UK called Click. And at the end, it's been 20 years they've been doing it. It's all about modern technology and what's the future looking like. And at the end of the show, the host always says, so glad that you've been with us for this program. We live online and we'd love to engage with you there. And then up comes the Instagram, up comes Twitter, up comes all the other social media places where you can connect with them. But just to say, that's where we live. We live online. We'd love to continue the conversation there. And so pastors, can I push you at the end of your service to not say, we're going to leave it another week until we can interact with you, but say, within minutes, you can continue to interact with us if you want, because that's where we live most of the week. And I know you live there too, but let's keep talking.
I completely agree with that. That's a thing that I've been trying to say for a long time, is that idea of, we hope to stay connected with you during the week on social media, not just we only want to connect with you if you come back next week. But you said something else as part of that, Duncan, on that TV show. They say, thank you for being part of this show. They're not saying thank you for being here. It's thank you for being part of this. And I would love pastors to close their messages like that as well. Hey, thanks so much for being part of our church this week. We'd love to stay connected with you online. I would add those two little pieces because it makes you feel more involved. As far as these resources go, if you're in Australia and you want to get these resources, I'll just tell you a little bit about what it is. Literally everything that we've gone through, how to measure casting a compelling vision for your church, all of these sort of things that we've been talking about throughout this call are going to be on this PDF, even the redefining your front door, living room, kitchen environments. I'm creating a PDF around all of that stuff that will walk you through, and it's going to be in depth. It's going to be, when I talk about measurement, it's not just, hey, here's what to measure, but I'm going to tell you how to find those metrics on Facebook Live, on YouTube Live. So it's going to be very, very practical. So you can get them in if you're in Australia by going to irresistiblechurches.network, irresistiblechurches.network/resources, and we'll have them all there. It's not that we want to take your email address. It's not that we want to ask for money. It's completely free, no strings attached. We just want to serve the churches in Australia. So make sure you go there, irresistiblechurches.network/resources. And, I want to continue to make myself available to anybody who's on this call, anybody who's watching this later on YouTube or listening on a podcast, all those places we're going to be putting this content. If you want to connect with me, if I can help serve you and support you in any way, I'm going to give you my email address. It's dave@irresistiblechurches.network. You can just contact me there.
And Duncan, how can people get in touch with you if they're in the UK and they don't know you already, or even if there's just some Aussie that wants to listen to some random accent from the UK occasionally.
I would love that. I would love that. That would be fantastic. Yeah. So Duncan at furtherfaster.network is my email address, Duncan at furtherfaster.network. I'm on Instagram and I'm on Twitter at Duncan Banks on both of those. I'd love to carry on the conversation with people, and I'm more than happy to jump on Zoom calls, more than happy to talk on email. Because like Dave says, we just want to be helpful. Our passion is to see the church grow. And if we can be helpful in that and point you into the right direction for some resources, then we are more than happy to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm available for those that maybe have questions or follow up. We actually want to provide more resources like this. And so we're going to have other webinars coming up here in the near future. So make sure you go to irresistiblechurches.network, and that's where you can get information about when these webinars and things will be happening. The other thing that I want to let you know about is really quickly, if you haven't had the chance to go to North Point Resources and sign up for their emails as well. North Point Resources, if you just Google it, they're providing a lot of free resources during this COVID-19 crisis as well, and want to make sure that you have access to all of those. Any final thoughts, guys, before we sign off?
Yeah, I do. Perko, I know that we also have a Slack channel available for church leaders in Australia to jump onto a Slack channel and just have conversations about the things that you're learning, to get resources, not just from us, but from other churches around the country as well. So how can people access that Slack channel?
Yeah, if you just want to shoot me an email, Jason at irresistiblechurches.network, put Slack channel in the subject line. I will make sure that you get invited and put into that as well, because we are dumping a ton of resources into that Slack channel. So again, it's just my first name, Jason at irresistiblechurches.network, and we will get you guys into that Slack channel as well. Hey, thank you both so much. Dave, thanks for getting up at the crack of literally dawn in Atlanta, Georgia this morning. Duncan, thank you for joining the call as well. And we'll get back to the beautiful game of cricket very shortly here. And hopefully the Aussies can continue to take the Ashes home every single summer.
You horrible man, Perko.
I had to throw it in. Had to throw it in for all of the Aussies listening and all those from the UK as well. Hey, thanks so much, folks, for listening. And we'll see you guys online next time.